Putin is the aggressor. Support their efforts strongly and fully to push back on aggression and win this war. If we show weakness and withdraw from our support for Ukraine, that will embolden the Chinese. That won't give us an opportunity to focus on the Chinese. That'll make our situation with the Chinese more challenging, not less so.
What is our interest? Why are we there? What are your thoughts on how we're handling Russia-Ukraine? China's come in, they're trying to negotiate a peace deal. We're fueling the war, basically forcing NATO's hand into aiding Ukraine. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are that that we can't lose sight of what's happened here. Putin is the aggressor. This is aggression at the heart of Europe, and this is a U.S. interest. This is a U.S. interest. So I believe we should strongly and decisively support the Ukrainians. I believe that President Biden hasn't done that. It's been very ham-handed. That doesn't mean give the Ukrainians everything, but it means support their efforts strongly and fully to push back on aggression and win this war. We don't do that because of human rights and the pursuit of liberty. Those are things that we're in support of. We do that because it's in U.S. interest to do so. And those that say that we should not do this, we should not focus here, we should turn our attention to China, those two are very connected, right? If we show weakness and withdraw from our support for Ukraine, that will embolden the Chinese. That won't give us an opportunity to focus on the Chinese. That'll make our situation with the Chinese more challenging, not less so. Now, with that said, listen, you far more recently than me, we've had 20 years of war in Afghanistan and Iraq where we lost sight of the end game, and I don't think had the kind of decisive victory we want. We spent, thousands of lives and treasure. And so for those people that say we need to be careful to make sure U.S. troops aren't drawn into this, I agree. For those who say we have to make sure the money doesn't get corrupted and stolen like it was at Bagram Air Force Base, I agree. So we have to be wise, but we also have to be forceful in our support and our strength for Ukraine.
What happens if the Chinese, the reason I'm bringing all this up is I think these are all reasons why America's falling. What happens if the Chinese successfully negotiate this peace deal?
Yeah, I think that would be disastrous, and I think that's unlikely. But it shows you the level of ambition that the Chinese have for becoming the world superpower, and it shows you the vacuum that weak leadership creates. So, if anyone's wondering about the ambition of China, the caginess of China, just watch what's happening and think about how craftily they're positioning themselves, whether it's in Ukraine or whether it's with partnership with Iran and Saudi Arabia, in a way that runs counter to U.S. interest. So we'll see what happens, but I think ultimately our leadership on the world stage, our strength at home, will make it very difficult for China to continue to fill these voids. But we leave voids and we show weakness, and this is going to continue.
What do you think our interest in the Ukraine-Russia conflict is? What is our interest? Why are we there?
Well, we're there, I think, because stability in Europe, the biggest market in the world other than Chinese and the United States, Western democracies, which have been our allies for many, many decades, unique economic partnerships and mutual interest, instability in Europe, chaos in Europe, ultimately risk U.S. interest. That's the primary reason. Instability, where and anyone who thinks that if you said tomorrow, let Putin have Ukraine, anyone who thinks that then that stops the aggression hasn't read history, because giving into aggression encourages aggression. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's in our interest, because stability in Europe, both economic and national security stability in Europe, is critical to U.S. interest. And that's why we should support Ukraine in pushing back on that assault. But we need to support them in the way I described, wisely, decisively, strongly, but not in a ways that becomes a slippery slope.
If they negotiate the peace deal, does that automatically throw us in the number 2 slot?
Well, I think there's a number of different things on the world stage that, no, I don't think one thing takes us from number one to number two. But there are a number of things that are currently happening, economically, national security-wise, and elsewhere, that in combination are why we're in peril. So I don't think there's one day that we'll wake up and say, oh, that happened, therefore. But listen, the trend line in relative terms, what's happening when I talk about decline? In absolute terms, we're slowing down in our capabilities economically, national security, and spiritually. But in relative terms, China's rising. And so it's across that front that we have to worry. And that's what the book tries to address. It tries to address a comprehensive whole of nation strategy for combating China, because it's not like a hole in one where all of a sudden we're back. It's lots of things that together have to represent a strategy for ensuring we remain strong and the superpower in the world.
Okay. One more question about this. If they negotiate that peace treaty and the war stops, does that throw us into a recession? Reason I'm asking is because the way I understand it, and I'm glad you're here because I do not understand economics, but the way I understand it is the only reason we're not in a recession is because we spun up the military-industrial complex. And Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, a couple other of these companies are the only ones that that they're the reason we have a positive GDP.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I think the amount of spending on Ukraine, while significant, is relatively small compared to the overall defense budget. Even the whole defense budget's $800+ billion, and we're talking tens of billions of dollars in the case of Ukraine. So, but it's an enormous amount of money to Ukraine. But it's not. This is the economy is not going to go one way or the other because of what's happening in Ukraine. The economy is at risk because of the enormous spending of Joe Biden. So trillions, more than $10 trillion of incremental spending over the next 10 years. So it dwarfs anything that's happened in our economy for forever. And it also is creating that misbalance between assets and liabilities, because the inflation is creating a need to raise interest rates in a way that's going to have lots of ripple effects. So I think the economy is at a lot of risk, but I don't think the primary issue is going to be Ukraine. It's going to be much more about how we deal with this mismatch that's been created by these terrible policies of Joe Biden.
Well, that's actually refreshing to hear.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Sean Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.